I am Meredith. I'm here for 30 minutes. It's the Speaker's Lounge. I am going to take questions from people in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube about today, specifically storytelling. So, I am Meredith of Grundy Coaching. I coach people in public speaking and presentation skills because I am invested in you being a more dynamic and credible speaker who presents with spark. So I want to start today's talk off by saying two things. One, if you do have comments or questions, please do put those in the chat. And if you happen to watch this after the 30-minute live, please, I still welcome questions and comments in the chat, and I will get back to you when I can, because I love to facilitate conversations about these things because I love helping people out. So I want to start by also, secondly, talking about an article that I read in the New York Times this last week about how to make memories last, or I think the article is how to make precious moments last, which I loved. And it's a really great article. It's long and it talks about, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, but Shannon Raghunath is a psychologist, and he talks about memory and how to retain those memories better. And it got me thinking about storytelling and how we can be better storytellers. And he talks about how there are so many distractions in today's world when it comes to those moments that we are experiencing in life. For example, our phone alerts, things that are popping up all of the time, habits that we have created for ourselves that we don't turn off when we are experiencing something. And one example he brought up is like, most people can remember their first concerts. And if you're as old as me, I didn't have a cell phone at my first concert, but I remember that first concert for many reasons. One, there were no distractions. I wasn't taking pictures of the performers up on stage. When Bjork walked out, I wasn't taking pictures of her. I was in the moment listening to the music. And the second reason is music is emotional. So we automatically connect to that on that level. So my challenge to all of you who are watching is, can you challenge yourselves to be in moments with others where you can turn off all of your distractions to help you not only remember those memories, but to become better storytellers? Because in storytelling, to me, it's about the details. It's about, how did you feel? What were you wearing? Where were you? What did the architecture of the room look like? How did this smile on that other person's face look like? All the little details. And I sometimes will use this example of, when I'm explaining something, I can say that I went and bought a jug of milk, for example, at the bodega. But if I say I live in Manhattan on 181 Street over by the Hudson and the George Washington Bridge, and I like to walk down the hill to go to the bodega that's next to the dry cleaners to get my jug of milk, automatically what happens is, if you're familiar at all with this area, you put yourself into that story. You can see what I'm talking about. It comes to life more for you. So I often hear, when I'm coaching people in storytelling, are more generalized stories. They don't give us the details. They don't share what the feeling was that you were holding when that moment in time happened to you. And when we can share those feelings, we can share those details, the colors, the sounds, and smells, then we are bringing our audience more into that world with us. Now, I'm going to discuss with you today two different types of storytelling. And again, if you have any questions or you want to make comments and you're a storytelling genius, I would love to hear from you. So please go ahead and let's participate in the comments. Let's in the chat and talk about these things. So we're going to talk about two types. There's storytelling and presentations. They're important because it's going to help drive our message home. It's going to help us connect with our audience better, engage with our audience better. And then there's also the storytelling of data and facts. Both are needed. Both are needed to help us take complicated information and simplify it. And sometimes we can do that through the use of story. So, hi, Jackie. Good to see you. I'm glad you're here. So, let's talk about why story and presenting is so important. One, yes, it increases the engagement of your audience. It enhances your persuasiveness and whatever it is that you're delivering, how you're persuasively telling and trying to get people to drive them to action, to inspire them. And it encourages action. And also, what I had alluded to at the very beginning of this talk is that it improves retention. So if you have a story and you're able to share that story and there's an emotional connect, people are going to retain that a lot more than if you just talked at them without story and shared all of the data and all of the facts and just gave them that kind of verbal dump, if you will. They're not going to retain as much information as you would like them to. So my thing that I'm always encouraging people to do is, if you're going to spend time putting together a presentation, please spend time on crafting that story that is going to help your audience engage more with that presentation. Hi, Raul. Good to see you as well. So if people have questions about storytelling that are specific to your pain points or your industry, please feel free to ask those questions in the comments and in the chat. So I want to talk a little bit about data story as well, because a lot of people that I work with oftentimes get to present a lot of data or architecture, and oftentimes it's really challenging to bring in story, to bring in that emotional connect when there's so much over here that needs to be talked about that is not necessarily a story, if you will. So how do you go about doing that? Well, telling a data story to me is about getting really clear about the data that you're presenting and what the data is and how that data is going to have an impact. So getting really clear too about how you're going to be delivering those technical data points by creating clear transitions between your slides and setting your audience up for what they're about to see, and then orienting them to what they are seeing, and then talking specifically about maybe just one key takeaway on each of those slides instead of everything that they're seeing, because that's hard to retain, but singling out one thing that they need to hear. And if there's a way that you can tie in the real world implications, that is how you're going to better deliver that information for your audience so that they actually remember what you shared. You have to consider all the time, what are their pain points? What are, yes, those real world implications? And how can I better craft a story or a narrative, whether it's data or whether it's a personal story, that's going to best help them out, best inspire them, best, what's the best way that I'm going to inspire them to action, if you will. And so, of course, in story, we want to share not too much to where it's overwhelming. We want to try to be succinct with our storytelling. And so I'm going to give you like a few exercises to think about. I'm going to give you one exercise to help inspire story for those of you who are like, I don't know if I even have anything to share. I don't know what stories I would share. I'm going to give you an exercise to think about. And then the second thing is that once you do identify those stories, is how to start thinking about what you should be sharing within that story. Thank you, Tina, for being here. I appreciate it. And again, I'm Meridith. If anyone has questions, I am here once a month for the Speakers Lounge to deliver as much value as I can in public speaking. And I will say it is challenging sometimes to do these 30 minutes solo, as Tina can attest. It can be challenging because it's just you, but it's good. I do this because I'm also practicing. We're all practicing. Okay, so back to the storytelling. The first thing I'm going to tell you is an exercise. I want you to, and I shared this, I believe, last week in a TikTok and also here on LinkedIn, but this is a great story because it's going to bring up stories that you haven't been thinking of. Just think of your timeline in life. Think about from starting at age 5 Go every 5 years. So 5, age 10, age 15, age 20 until your current age. And I want you to think about the stories that live within those timelines. So it could be like between the ages of 5 and 10, right? It could be just age 10, it could be age 20 or the years between, like when you were in college and so forth. Identify what those stories are and then write them down. And on that timeline, you can just write down the headline of the story and then notice what was interesting to you. Oh, I am curious about what happened in college in this story in that dorm room at that time. Then go write that story down and see what emerges from that. Maybe it is something that happened to you when you were younger that you want to explore a little bit further. Write that story down. Now, if writing on a computer is hard because of whatever you feel like maybe you get stumped or distracted, there are tools like Otter, OTTER.ai that you can use that will then also deliver you a transcript if being verbal is easier for you. There's Yoodly, YOODLI.ai, which is also not just a wonderful tool for transcriptions, but it's also a wonderful practice tool for the next time you have a presentation or an interview. It's a really wonderful tool to help you. There's an AI coach involved in that. So check that out as well. So that is one story that you can try. I will give you a bonus story, a bonus exercise, which is to identify what your core values are. Identify up to 5 core values, and then look at those values and ask, what are some stories that might be associated with each one of those values? So, for example, maybe family is something that you highly value. Well, think about then, what's a story about my family? Maybe it's a story that I find myself saying often in front of a group of people. Maybe it's that story. Maybe it's about that story, about that time that my whole family went to Disney World. And then you write that story down. And then, or maybe, for example, one of my core values is autonomy. I realized at the beginning of the pandemic that I had a hard time auditioning as an actor because I was really uncomfortable with sitting back waiting for someone to choose me. That didn't feel like it was within my integrity. So I quickly identified one of my core values is autonomy. I really like to have more control on how I live my life and how I get myself opportunities. And so that might be something that I would look at even further. And maybe there's a story embedded in there about a time when I was auditioning that would be a great story to share for a presentation that I'm giving or a talk that I'm putting together, right? So think about what are those core values and what emerges from that. And the reason why I feel like that is successful is because when we are in alignment with what we value, then those stories come to life in a much richer way. So really think about what those core values are. So those are 2 exercises that you can think about to help you find stories. Now, when you're doing this too, I want to also say, try not to think about, let's say you do have a presentation on the horizon, try to take that presentation and put it on the shelf for a while and just don't edit your stories based off of what it is that you need to present. Because maybe one of those stories that you didn't think of would be a great metaphor for whatever it is that you're presenting, whether that be a product or a service or a keynote of sorts. So try to just do the brainstorming first before you do anything. So then you can start to incorporate that story or those stories into your presentation, right? So for example, I had a client once, and I've used this example before, so some of you may have heard this one, but he had a big AI product that his company had developed for ad agencies. And so he got to deliver this presentation, but he didn't have a story attached to it. So I said, okay, let's do a little searching here. So he found a story that he shared about his son who couldn't walk up the stairs with both hands using the railing. And so he one day came home, he had this aha moment. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to grab a hammer. I'm going to hand him the hammer, and he's going to put it in his hand." And they did that, and the kid walked up the stairs, and he had one hand on the railing and a hammer in the other hand, and walked up the stairs, and he didn't have to use both hands on the railing anymore. He took the hammer away, and boom, the kid was able to walk up the stairs with one hand on the railing confidently, which was what the objective was. So he then started his presentation with that story. He told it much better than I just did right then, but he started his presentation with that story. And so from there, he then said, "We are your hammer. We are the solution, the AI solution to your problem." So it was a quick anecdotal story, but that's probably something that they're going to remember. Oh, that's the company, that's the hammer, that's the solution to our problem. So thinking about short anecdotal stories like that, they don't have to be long stories, but something that's going to emotionally connect with your audience. And again, if you are just joining now, what I had mentioned early on in this talk is how stories, what I often hear are generalization of stories, like the idea, like something happened, like I went and got milk is a generalization. But giving the details of the story is, uh, it was a Sunday morning. My daughter woke up. We didn't have any milk in the house. She was feeling super sad because she really wanted to eat this cereal that I had just gotten from the grocery store. And so I said, "I will go out and I will buy some milk." Great. So, but where do I live? Oh, I live in New York City. So I left my apartment in Manhattan and I walked down 181 with the George Washington Bridge behind me. It was a brisk morning. And I went to the bodega right next to the dry cleaners and I grabbed myself a jug of milk and brought it home to my daughter that Sunday morning, where she sat down and I drank my coffee and she enjoyed her morning bowl of cereal. It's very different than my daughter was hungry and so I went and bought milk. I hear those stories though a lot. So I'm asking you, I'm inviting you, fill in the details. I want the details. I want to feel like I'm there with you. Help me feel like I'm there with you. If you have any questions at this point about stories, or if there was a time where you're like, "Oh, this went really wrong," or "I'm a technical person, I don't even know how to incorporate story, I don't know why it's relevant," please feel free to put those questions into the chat. If there is, oh gosh, I don't know, like a way that maybe you have a question about how to incorporate humor into your stories. I always say to people, like, notice what are the things that you like to talk about with your friends at parties? Like, what are the things that bring you joy, make you laugh? Are you a joke person? Are you someone that needs to craft a joke? Are you a person who is really good at making stuff up on the spot, maybe engaging with your audience, getting a feel for the energy in the room and being able to riff off of something? So really figuring that piece out. And at some point, I would love to do one of these speaker lounges just purely on incorporating humor in itself. So to go back a little bit, the reason why story is so important is because we need that emotional connection with our audience. It needs to be there in order for them to retain the information, in order for them to remember what you shared. Tina would love to be funny. You are funny, Tina. You are funny. You have to trust. And humor comes from a place of honesty. So oftentimes if we force the humor, we're not very funny. But if we're just coming from a place of truth, then oftentimes that humor will hit. So just be beautifully who you are. And then what also happens with story, when we tell story, is that it increases engagement. And that's really what we want, is we want to increase engagement. We want people to feel engaged. And we want them to feel inspired to go take action, and we want them to remember. So when we tell story, when we bravely tell story, that's how we can do that. Now, let me talk a little bit about bravely telling story. There are stories I often hear too from people. I haven't had any real lived experiences or traumatic experiences that I think people would be, I haven't, overcome adversity. There are many stories that are relatable. You don't have to have had a traumatic event in your life to have a good story. It can be a very simple story. For example, what I loved about that article that I shared at the beginning of this talk was that he brought up the Descendants, which is this punk band that I used to love to go see all the time when I was living in Colorado. So between the ages of 13 and 17, and I don't know, like Tina, you may not even know this about me, but I loved going to punk shows and I loved jumping in the mosh pit. Loved it. It was exhilarating. So when he brought up the Descendants, I was like, yes, 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 you did. And it just, what happened was, and he brought up that one simple detail, I was transported back to my youth. And there I was, super, I'm like 100 pounds wet and dripping wet in this. I would jump into this thing with these like big, like burly men who were like stomping in a circle and slamming their bodies up against each other in these mosh pits. And I absolutely loved it. And I also loved standing on the outside of it and like getting in the stance and just like being the guardrail and like pushing people back into the pit. I loved that. Loved doing that. So that brought up a story. That might be a story that I hadn't thought of in a really long time that I might share. So just look at those details. Like that little detail blossomed something in me. Now, is it going to blossom something in everybody in your audience? No, it's not. But that story could change one person's mind or heart. You never know. So that story, I think, is a really fun little story. Like, I used to love mosh pits. I would wear my little Doc Martens and I would wrap them in my duct tape on the toes, and I would wear my tank top and my ripped up jeans, and I'm 14 years old and I'm jumping in the pit, and I would sometimes fall down. I get picked back up again, and I was sweaty and it's smelly and I loved it. That's my story. And I'm sure that I could find something, metaphorically speaking, about teamwork, right? Like, oh, the mosh pit worked together. We all walked and ran into each other in the same direction, listening to music that really got our souls. I could compare that maybe to teamwork, or I could compare that to how sometimes it feels like in my family. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out there. So it could just be the smallest of stories. You don't have to have overcome like a big major trauma to have a simple or engaging story for your audience to understand. And then also on the flip side of that is that to make sure that when you do tell story, and if you have had trauma that, and you want to share a story, that I encourage people to always make sure that they're not speaking from an open wound or a scab, if you will, that is healed. That's a story that, it doesn't mean it's not going to bring up emotion. It could definitely bring up emotion, but that it's healed, that you're healed, and that you're able to share that story with open heart to other people, that you are not re-traumatizing yourself. So that, I feel, is also important for people to think about, for those of you who want to move into telling your story more, and getting on more stages, or perhaps you want to be a keynote, perhaps you have something bigger that you want to share with others so that you can help save some lives. Make sure that you have taken care of you first. So I went off a little bit on my tangent. I got really excited about the whole mosh pit thing. Okay. Has anyone else ever been in a mosh pit before? Like, I'm telling, like a real one, not just jumping up and down and bumping into each other. Okay, never mind. I'm going off. All right. Any other questions before I wrap this up? I just gave a few things off of the top of my head today. I gave you a couple of exercises. I'll repeat those again. One is a timeline from ages 5 until current age. So every 5 years, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20. Think about, what were some of those lived experiences? What are some of those moments? And then what are some of your core values? Are there stories based off of your core values? And if you want something to help you out, please, oh, Raul, you've been in one. I kind of knew that about you. Please reach out to me, and I'm happy to give you a couple of handouts to help you facilitate the storytelling journey of yours. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can share within this short period of time with all of you. that would be helpful. Um, I missed my DM. Uh, I feel like I had another thought in my head that just escaped me, but oh, what was it? It was about storytelling. Oh, it's okay. I went to tons of concerts, but not sure what a mosh pit is. I'll send you a video of what a mosh pit is. It's a sweaty, lovely, fun time. That's what I call it, a mosh pit. Um, so that's it for today, y'all. Like I'm gonna end just a little bit early. This was storytelling. This is the Speakers Lounge. I'm here once a month on Mondays. This month I'm teaching the accelerator program, so I started a little bit later than usual, but you can see me here every first Monday of the month at 12 noon Eastern. So in March, we will have another speakers lounge. I'm not sure what the topic is, but if there's something that you would like me to talk about, please go ahead and share that in the comments or in the chat. Let me know, and I will do my best to come here and share as much value as I possibly can to help you be a more confident and credible speaker. I will share that one other thing that helps with storytelling too is improv. Improvisation is a wonderful form where you make stuff up on the spot. Stories can emerge from that form that maybe you hadn't thought of before. And also, it's a great way to expand on those stories. Like I said earlier, that you always start from a place of truth, but sometimes that truth can go into fiction land. And sometimes that can lead to other fun stories that maybe you hadn't thought of as well. So, if you are interested in improv, I do have a program called Confidently Speaking, which is improv for speakers. So, you'll develop your adaptability muscle, your find new ways to incorporate humor, use your stories, and also build confidence as a speaker. So thank you for being here. Please, if you aren't following me already here on LinkedIn, please do. And if for those who are in the comments, thank you for being here. And please follow each other, support each other, lift each other up, because we need more of that in this world, lifting each other up. All right, I'm Meredith. I'm here to add as much value as I can when I can, and I will see all of you later. Thank you.